Hey, and welcome to Better Utah Broadcast. My name is Katie Matheson. I am the Communications Director here at Alliance for Better Utah. Today we have a special episode. We, of course, have our Policy Director, Lauren Simpson. Welcome back.
Thanks.
From next door. And we have Doris Schmidt, who is a wonderful super volunteer here with us at Alliance for Better Utah. Thank you so much for being with us
You're
today.
welcome.
So today our special episode is about rural Utah. Tomorrow we will be releasing a, year-long, 6 months plus long report that we've been, Doris really has been doing. Yeah. And Lauren has been assisting with that as well. But before we get into that, we're going to be talking a little bit about a couple other things. So first, reminder that we do this every Wednesday, 12:30. Join us on your Facebook, join us on your Facebook, but join us on your lunch hour. Ask us any questions. If you have questions either on Instagram or on Facebook, please, put them in the comments and we can hopefully answer them as they come up. And of course, be sure to click Get Reminder so that you are reminded when we start going live. So before we get into our interesting conversation about rural Utah and what we found, I want to remind you that today is the last day to enter our Escape the Inversion contest. So if you are like anyone in this office and you've had like inversion cough and you're looking to get away, we have a contest that you can enter, and if you win, you get a 7-night stay at Club de Soleil in Las Vegas in February. That's the 3rd to the 10th. So they have a pool. I personally would spend the whole time, sipping mimosas by the pool, but you do you, So today is the last day. Enter by 11:59 p.m. in order to have a chance to win, and we will announce the winner later this week. And also, we are now looking for stories for why you voted for Prop 3. So Proposition 3 is, of course, Medicaid expansion. Utah voters in November voted for full Medicaid expansion, and they were looking to start implementing in April. Is that correct?
April 1st.
April 1st. And now, of course, what's happening, because it's Utah and it's the legislature, they're looking to fix it because they thought we didn't know what we were voting for. And so if you want to remind the legislature why you want full Medicaid expansion in our state, which would mean access to health care for an extra 100,000+, is that right, Utahns?
Mm-hmm.
Or a total 100,000+ Utahns who would get health care. Please use hashtag why I voted yes and hashtag Utah decided. Again, that's why I voted yes and Utah decided, and share your story. You can take a picture of yourself holding a poster that says, your short story, and let us know. So, without further ado, at the end, I want us to go into Prop Watch and see if there are any updates there, although I think I just gave it, but
yeah.
we'll touch it anyway. So let's get into our report. Doris, can you give us kind of like a rundown of why we decided to do this report and what it is?
That's a long way back to remember, but I think it had to do with the governor's 20K jobs by, did I do that right? No, 25K, sorry. Don't want to underestimate it, by 2020 initiative. And looking at that, we realized that, Utah gets a lot of press for being a great state for business, for its economy. It's doing really well as long as you're living on the Wasatch Front, which is more than 90% of the population, so that's great. But we wanted to look at what's happening to the rural people who are looking for these jobs, and realizing that if you're not telling the story about all of Utah, you're not telling the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
And looking into that, we found out that the counties that have the highest rates of poverty, of of unemployment, of low wages, they're all rural.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question was sort of, what do these counties need? What are they doing? And what should Wasatch Front people and businesses do for them?
Mm-hmm. Great. Lauren, what kind of things did we learn as we, and I say we in like the collective way because I certainly did not do anything on this report, but what did we learn as we were kind of putting this together? Doris kind of touched on it, but anything that really sticks out to you on this?
So one fact that I think really stuck out to me was that learning that Utah was the 9th most urbanized state in the nation. And what that means is that Utah is the 9th state with the highest concentration of people, like per square mile, in the nation. And that's, like Doris said, along the Wasatch Front. And so as our state continues to grow exponentially, we're going to see that urban-rural divide that people talk about a lot grow even wider because rural areas are suffering from like a slow bleed of population loss because people move to the Wasatch Front for jobs, and then the Wasatch Front is expected to double by 2050. So you really do have two really distinct communities with very different needs. And I think another reason why we wanted to do this report was, I think sometimes there's a perception, whether it's true or not, that progressive organizations don't care about what happens to people who don't live in cities. Like we aren't interested in the welfare, the socioeconomic welfare of people who are maybe not just like marginalized, like we usually think like minority groups or people on the fringes of society, but people also on the literal fringes of society who don't have the same opportunities and access, and people who might be, at the other end of the political spectrum, but like the policies that we advocate for, we want to make sure that they benefit everybody and not just people who are our traditional audience or who are living in Salt Lake City. So really this is a report that's not focused on like telling rural counties what to do, but just sort of like educating people living in cities that like, hey, this is a problem and this is something you need to pay attention to, because we should be figuring out, how do we make our economy in the state work for everybody, and not just areas of the state, like the urban areas that are already doing really well.
Right. And so that urban-rural divide starts to happen as they grow. These two different areas in our state start to grow more distinct. I don't want to say separate, but like, they start to have more distinct needs as population growth happens. A part of that, of course, is that, our urban areas, as they become more populous, they will be experiencing growth that is both, part of our birth rate. We just have lots of kids here,
right.
But also the fact that people are moving in from out of state because of the tech sector that they're trying to grow here, but also something that we don't talk about a huge amount, which was I think highlighted in this report, was that some of our growth, I don't know how much, but some of it will actually be coming from rural parts of Utah. In other words, like, one quote that was in the report was, our greatest export is our children.
You keep hearing that over and over again, and that's a vicious cycle, because when the children do become educated, they get their college educations, they leave, and they go where Utah, the jobs are. And in the meantime, urban Utah is saying, we can't find enough employees to fill all the jobs we have. We need more workers. So I think one of the things we found is that counties are trying really actively to do more training of their young people in the kinds of jobs that they can be filling, so that they don't have necessarily to leave if they don't want to.
Right, to keep them there. Now, something that this report I thought did really well, let me back up. First of all, it highlights 16 counties that have been identified as rural. So this wasn't just something arbitrary that we decided on, right? The 16 counties came from what again?
This was the State Office of Rural Planning, and they had identified, rather than like for the 25K jobs by 2020, they used all of the non-urban counties. In this case, the Rural Planning Group used the urban counties, and also marked transitional counties where they're near the urban centers, and most of the people drive into the urban centers for work. And we just really looked at the 16 that are classified as rural.
As rural by the state.
Right.
And so something that was, I think, very interesting, the great part of this report, I mean, we didn't do any of our own like reports ourselves. Like, we didn't collect the data. What we did is we gathered the data that other people had collected, and we put it together in this report. And something that I find very valuable for me as someone who lives along the Wasatch Front is to see this data like back to back, right? Just a simple snapshot of these 16 counties, and then there's at the beginning there's hard numbers, population in the county versus population in the state, median income, stuff like that. And then it gives a snapshot of education, health, economies and jobs, and a bandwidth, which is a very interesting one.
That's a big important. They've made progress even while we were working on this report. I think everyone in the state realizes that having people connected,
high-speed internet is important.
That's for education and for jobs. That's where a lot of it is going to come from.
Right. So I lost my train of thought on the other one, but that's basically what the report is it's these 16 counties, and it gives the information, and it was very, I think, stark for me, and I know logically, as someone who is fairly well informed, that healthcare costs are difficult all across the country. They're difficult in this state, but when the area gets smaller, the healthcare costs go up, right? And so there's a smaller population, sometimes it's an older population, and so the healthcare costs are higher. They have fewer places where they can go for their healthcare because there may be like one medical center or hospital in the area, and then they have to pay a lot for it. Now, of course, some of these counties are what we call coal country, right? And coal is hard on the body, right?
Mm-hmm.
Having never worked in a coal mine myself, my understanding is that it can be very physically demanding. And so I want to jump now into what you found to be most interesting or most surprising for you. So Lauren, you mentioned that we're the 9th most urban state in the nation, and I think that's very interesting. For me, the thing that jumped out is, and now of course I can't remember which county it was, but it was a county that has been a coal area for a long time, and the number of opioid prescriptions there were about 140 something per 100 people.
Yeah.
And they also, unsurprisingly, have a huge issue with the opioid crisis. And a lot of these people are people who are working in the coal industry, and they're popping pills to help them go to work.
Right.
Right. It's not a recreational thing. They just want to work.
And that's what people pointed out, that this is not a question of weakness or laziness. This is a question of hard workers who want to stay hard workers.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me, and it came early on, was just that the importance of diversifying the economy of each of these counties.
Mm-hmm.
And they realize it when they were filling out their reports on their own economies and where they should improve and what's good about them. They all said they need to diversify. If you're just relying on coal or on gas for your income, there are booms and busts, and you don't want to have to live through the busts. So if you have other industry sectors also, that will get you through it better. So that was really important.
Yeah. And those booms and busts also seem to happen a lot with, of course, the tourism industry, right? There's fluctuation in when there lots of tourists and when there are a few tourists. I mean, was it Daggett County where it's like the majority of people who live there, it's actually a second home or something to that effect?
I think there were 2 counties that are among the top 10 in the nation for second homes, and one of it might be
Rich County with Bear Lake, and then
Daggett County was, I think, 75% second homes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's great when it's great, but it's rough other times.
Right.
Yeah. Did you have any surprising facts from that, or was it just the 9th most urban in the country?
I mean, I didn't have a lot of knowledge going into the report. I couldn't have, if you had given me a map of Utah and told me, where is Garfield County, I would not have been able to tell you where it is. So I think for me the main takeaway was just getting a more in-depth feel based on, things that people who live there have said. We did a few interviews and just read through a bunch of reports, but just getting a better feel of what life there is actually like, and what the problems are and what the advantages are. There's a reason that people don't want to all move to Orem, you know?
Yeah. I mean, they live in rural Utah because they like rural Utah.
Because they love it.
Where they want to live,
Yeah.
And something that was not in the report, but something that Lauren and I have spent a fair amount of time talking about is that as we, the next question, of course, is, well, what can we do? And in this report, we don't make any prescription because I don't think that we are well situated to make any prescription.
Right. I mean, what we were basically doing was saying, well, what information is out there? Let's gather it together and see what story it tells. And we told the story of this is what rural Utah is going through right now. This is what it's feeling, and these are the potentials for it.
Yeah. And in doing a moderate amount of story research in terms of news stories on the people who live in rural Utah as this conversation continues, one thing that I found that, again, Lauren and I have discussed is that, when we in the cities talk about, what can we do for rural counties, a lot of the times it's just, well, we should just do jobs retraining, and of course we should just have them, train everybody to do coding or train everybody to, be customer service. And that ignores the reality that there are people for whom physical labor and work and working with their hands is what they feel called to do.
Okay.
And so that's kind of, I don't know, I of course again have no solution, but I think that that's a really interesting part of the conversation that is sometimes lost. And so as these coal mines or oil and gas kind of close down, what can we replace it with? Again, diversifying. So maybe not just call centers, but what other types of physical, mechanically, jobs can we open up for mechanically minded people? It's a very interesting conversation to have. I don't know what the answer is, of course. So what can people along the Wasatch Front do with this information now that we have it, Lauren?
So the main purpose of the report was education, and I think that is just the first step to understand the problem, understand what's going on, and understand where you fit in the bigger picture. This sort of ties back to a previous report that we released this year about how redistricting affects rural Utah, but a lot of times there are people, I would say, especially like in Utah County, and we have a few representatives from Utah County who consistently vote against any government program, any kind of government spending that helps people, and the people that they're voting against are rural Utahns. And I think for people who don't support programs that support rural businesses, a lot of times it's just a lack of information, a lack of understanding, what is really going on down there, what is life really like, when you're, swamped with tourists in the summer and then in the winter there's no work, or, and so I think by educating ourselves we can be, I think the word allies is overused, but we can be better allies and better neighbors. That's a better word for it. Better neighbors to, people who live in rural parts of the state.
Right, and also remembering what they do for urban Utah, that they do produce the food, the energy, give you the places to stay, give you the guides for recreation. I mean, it's not just a question of what can we do for them in an altruistic way, but we're all working together, and this is part of the community, all serving important functions. Yeah,
rural communities enhance my quality of life because I take a long weekend and go to Boulder. Yeah.
And I mean, there's also mining, and every my phone is being used right now. We have 2 phones going right now, and those materials came from a mine somewhere, right? And a lot of those mines are in rural parts, not just of our state, but of the country.
Processing plants.
Right, all these things, So lots of things to keep in mind, and of course, it's a long report, but we encourage you to look through it. I mean, it's pretty easy to take in, one county at a time. And then especially if you are active in the legislative session, which is coming up in a weirdly close amount of time, on the 28th is the first day. If you plan on being up at the legislature and being a citizen lobbyist, talking with your legislator, keep this in mind as we start to have these conversations, even through the Prop 3 lens, which is, of course, again, Medicaid expansion, or even Prop 2, which was medical cannabis. We talk about the opioid epidemic, people who have chronic pain, stuff like that. So,
And I will say also, if you're going to be involved with the legislative session, it is harder for people who live far away in Salt Lake to be up at the Capitol.
Right.
So,
always
if you can add your voice and amplify a message of somebody who isn't able to make it up there, that's a good thing to do.
Or call that relative that you haven't talked to in forever in rural Utah and say, hey, what's going on there? What kind of things are you looking for? Stuff like that, And so now we're going to head over really quickly. We're just going to do a little preview of Prop Watch. So of course, Prop Watch is our program that we're running when we're watching out for the propositions 1, 2, 3, and 4, and of course the ballot initiative process itself. And so Lauren, our policy director, is keeping an eye on those and updating us on any changes. Do we have any changes recently?
Well, there was an article this morning. Senator Christensen confirmed that he is running a bill that would essentially put Medicaid expansion on hold indefinitely because he wants to replace it with his partial Medicaid expansion bill, which requires a federal waiver. Those waivers have never been approved with the enrollment caps, which is what he wants. So it would delay Medicaid expansion indefinitely and might not ever get approved. Utah tried it in 2018, partial Medicaid expansion, and it didn't work. The federal government did not approve it. So that's concerning. There are also bills that would just get rid of Prop 3 entirely that he mentioned. So we'll be looking for those. We'll also be looking for changes to Prop 4. So far, we haven't seen anything that would substantively alter it, but Chuck Weiler recently reiterated that he is trying to convince the legislature to sue over it. So there's a lot of stuff going on. We'll be keeping an eye on it.
Well, excellent.
Yep.
Hundreds of thousands of Utahns voted for Medicaid expansion, and one guy wants to come in and say, no, I know better. Tisk, tisk, tisk.
So one more plug, share your stories on, what's our hashtag?
Why
I voted
why
yes.
I voted yes, and Utah decided, because of course the slogan for Prop 3 was Utah decides, and so
Healthcare,
obviously
yeah.
Utah decided, right? Utah decides healthcare. Utah decided this is what Utahns want. Democrats, Republicans, Independents.
The question of what should we do about Medicaid expansion is over.
Yeah, it's
That has been asked and
settled.
answered.
Yep.
So
all right, Doris. Thank you for joining us.
thank you.
I'm excited to put our report out tomorrow. I'm excited for people to see the fruits of your work.
It was every single county had things where you'd say, wow, did you know this? This is amazing. And it's all delivered very nicely in little bite-sized pieces, so definitely read through it.
Yeah, cool. And Lauren, of course, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And Chase behind the camera. Thank you, Chase. Bye, guys.
Cheers.